presentation, or if you have to leave early, if you just give a little feedback. You don't have to put your name on it, it's all optional. But we're trying to improve our programs and make this an awesome thing. So thanks for being here, everybody. I'm so sorry, I didn't even look. I'm not sure if you have something to write with, but I have something here. Okay, awesome.
Good evening. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. We really appreciate it. My name is Stacy Stover. I am one of 2 freshman counselors and one of 8 counselors overall that we have here at BB. Basically what we wanted to try to start doing was, as we see the need for mental health needs rising, we wanted to provide more and more information for parents. So trying to provide you the opportunity to get information not only about the things that are affecting our children here at school, but also to look at resources in the area and things like that. NAMI is an amazing organization. It stands for National Alliance for Mental Illness, and they basically are out promoting awareness for mental health concerns. They have wonderful resources, and they're going to tell you a little bit more about that. So Millie Shepish, did I say that right? Shepich has come out to present to our students before, and so we really wanted her to come back and talk to parents and kind of give you some basic information. And my goal is that we'll, continue to have more and more of these parent universities to provide more and more information to all of you, so that you know how to help your students better, you know who to contact if you need help, and you just kind of have some awareness of what's going on with the students and your children that are living in our world today. So I really appreciate you coming out. If you have any questions afterwards, we'll be around. There'll be some question and answer. There's resources out on the table as you leave if you didn't grab them as you came in. And I'm going to have Millie come up and present to you. Thank you so much.
I'd like to just quickly thank again Stacy and Megan for putting this together. This is a really awesome opportunity to talk about mental health, but what's really, really nice is to have parents come out and to support this. So let me tell you a little bit about myself, and I want to introduce my colleague Tina, who's walking around in just a second here. But so we're representing. I'm gonna try this for a second, and for the folks out there that are listening to this online, sorry, we just try to get this. My tech guy there. All right, test. Is this working? Can we hear it? Oh, beautiful. Okay, now I feel a little better. I can move around a bit. So anyhow, back to this. So like Stacy said, this is a presentation that's brought to you by NAMI Will Grundy. And actually I wanted to give you a quick background on the National Alliance on Mental Illness. It actually started over 40 years ago as a grassroots organization. A group of parents were sitting around concerned about their family members, and they knew that they were struggling, but they didn't know how to help. And from their talks and their concern, it grew into this national organization where we have over 600 affiliate chapters throughout the United States, so it's really awesome. And in Illinois, we have some very active NAMI groups. I'm actually a volunteer for Will Grundy, and I also work for DuPage County in terms of giving presentations to students and to staff. And actually, you're going to be my first parent group that I'm talking with, so I'm really excited today. Another thing that I'm going to be sharing is some of the things that we do through the programs to parallel a little bit what maybe your students might hear about, so you have some understanding. Tina will be coming up midway through the presentation to talk about resources, but Tina Mackey is our president of the...
Welcome, everyone.
Yes, she's the president of NAMI Will Grundy, and she does so many things for that organization, and it's just awesome. So I'll invite her up to talk really specifically about resources. So a little bit more about why I came to doing this, and I'll share another big personal story when I get to the point, because I'll incorporate how I work with students. A retired health educator. I started my career, a long time ago, 37 plus years ago. But I had to stop teaching, not because I didn't love students anymore. I just was ready to do some other things in my life, and of course my husband wanted to travel. Well, then the pandemic hit, so life changed, and I just didn't get enough of working with students. So I'm very passionate about this topic because I think it's just so important to be able to open doors and to help young people feel comfortable about talking about things that are awkward and things that just don't feel right. And to tell you the truth, parents, I'm going to let you know a few things that students have told me, kind of on the side and things like that. And so again, we're going to have some tough conversations, but I want you to know it's okay not to be okay. and there's a whole bunch of different ways to support youth, and it's okay if sometimes you don't feel comfortable either, because we're going to help everybody get to a point where we know who to reach out to and how to feel more comfortable. So I put together this presentation, and again, I know some of you have a lot of experience with mental health, and maybe you're living it and you have somebody in your family that's dealing with a mental health condition, and maybe you haven't, or maybe you're just not sure, or maybe you're here because you just want to have more information. So I know we framed this up at how parents can support their students, the youth, but again, I'm not just talking about students, I'm also going to talk about you, I'm also going to talk about other family members, because you know, you just never know when things are going to happen, and you're going to be the one that might be the person to help, okay? And it's actually, you can get comfortable with it, and we can do this together, okay? So, here we go. I got a few things for you. I gotta get used to my technology. There we go. All right, so when you walk out the door, here's what I want you to take with you. I want you to be able to recognize mental health signs and symptoms. I want to be able to reduce the stigma today, and I want you to feel comfortable at recognizing when sometimes we're maybe using stigmatizing language, or sometimes when there's those walls or barriers, maybe not even intentionally, maybe unintentionally. How can we break those down? And then how do we reach out for help, and what are some other resources? We always call this the lived experience. So when I'm up here talking with you, parents, please don't feel like I'm telling you that you have to do it. This is the only one way to do things. These are just going to be a collection of stories that have, you know, I've heard from sometimes parents, sometimes teachers, and just trying to bring it all together, and of course, from the students. And so we'll pull it all together, and then Tina's going to share some really important information. So that's kind of, this is our mission today. And I like to start out talking a little bit about what is mental health. So we need to review this, because chances are, I've already dated myself, so right, you know, I've had a full teaching career, so I've been at it for 33 plus years and beyond. And so that puts me somewhere in my 50s. So like when we grew up, if you're in that age bracket, maybe you didn't talk about mental health. And so I'd just like to start out with talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly. So mental health, we all have it because we all have brains, right? You know, and so mental health comes from the things that are happening in our life, the experiences, and then how we think about them. And then from that, we have certain types of feelings. If we have positive mental health, we hopefully want our mental health to be really good, and things are going our way, but the reality, and we know it, parents, your mood does not stay the same all day. It goes up and down, okay? And then you have those moments where, you know, you're just in between, but we want to try to get people to feeling good about what's happening to them, and when they don't feel good about that, can they identify it? Can they recognize? Can they understand their emotion? Can they label it properly, and can they express it? Those are some really important skills, and by the way, I'm stealing some work from Mark Brackett. Okay, and if you haven't had a chance to look at any of his work, he does phenomenal stuff. He has a program that talks about emotional intelligence, and those are the first four tenets of one of the things he calls ruler skills, and trying to help people to understand, first of all, we're feeling human beings, okay? But, you know, we expect people to regulate their emotions, and it's hard to do that sometimes when they don't even understand what they're going through. Okay, and so again, especially with youth, and especially at this time in their life in adolescence, they may not really understand what's happening with different life situations, so we have to work through all those stages and get to some regulating. So we know that mental health affects students' abilities to learn. We know that it affects their attendance, their development, their relationships. It's going to impact long-term success, and then of course it impacts their physical health, and vice versa. Their physical health will impact their mental health. And so we're going to talk about some strategies that will help to improve mental health in general, and that's really what the tenets of health education is all about. We're talking about on a day-to-day basis, how do we try to keep our physical self healthy so that it's going to spill over into those abstract areas like mental, social, emotional health, intellectual health, and spiritual health. How does that all work together? Okay, so that's what mental health is all about. And again, it's no different for an adult. All these things are going to be impacted, right? So like I know we're talking about students and attendance, but for adults, it's going to impact when they go to jobs. You know, are you showing up for your work, right? And so again, I'm just making my comments because some of you have children that are older, right? They're maybe past that adolescent age, they're young adults, they're in their early 20s, but they may be struggling. And so, you know, again, to have these conversations, these are some really important basic things to understand. And by the way, if you have a question, please don't wait till the end. Let's just do this today because we're a small group, we're small and we're mighty. And I'm going to try to make this a little bit more interactive at a few points, okay? And I might ask for a few show of hands so I can kind of move this along. So now I want to talk briefly about what are mental health conditions. I'm going to show you a video in just a moment of other mental health conditions. I'm not going to talk specifically about one mental health condition. I'm going to talk in general today. And so what I want to use is a comparison. Okay, just by a quick show of hands, how many of you have ever broken a bone in your life? Anybody? Okay, and I picked that because it's a physical health condition that a lot of times is pretty obvious. And just by shaking your heads, when you broke that bone, did you have some pain? Did you feel like you needed to cry maybe, or maybe you did cry, okay? And then what happened next? Maybe you needed to go see a doctor, probably most likely, right? And I'm getting a few head shakes out there. You needed to go see a doctor because the doctor is the person that can help to make that better. Well, when we compare it to mental health conditions are no different, except mental health conditions affect the way people think, feel, and behave. But unlike physical health conditions, where there's usually some real concrete things pretty quick, sometimes mental health conditions take a while before they show up or they're really concrete, and sometimes they're very difficult to diagnose. And so again, we're not here as diagnosing professionals. We're here today just to talk about opening those lines of communication, being open to the fact that, hey, maybe a mental health condition is developing, and then where do we go from there? Mental health conditions are very common and they're very treatable. There's help out there. There's so many different things that we can do, and it doesn't always necessarily involve hospitalization or therapies. It may involve medication, but again, that's where we let the team of professionals figure out what's going to be the best approach if someone has a mental health condition. What mental health conditions are not, they're not anyone's fault. So if it's you, a friend or a family member, your student that might be struggling, please don't feel embarrassed or ashamed. We want people to go get the help that's out there so that they can live their good life. And mental health conditions should not be limiting in any kind of way. And again, I don't have a slide, but when we talk with youth, we sometimes in our class, the program that we do is a national program called Ending the Silence. And it's a program where we talk about a whole bunch of things, but we also include the fact that there are many celebrity types that are living with mental health conditions very successfully. They're getting their treatment, they're very active, they're advocates. And so again, we want to shine that positive light on living with mental health conditions. So this is the video that I'm talking about, so we'll take a minute to look at this. By the way, all of my materials I've taken from YouTube, so if you're at home watching this and the quality isn't very good, or you want to share this with someone else because you're going to be the next advocate, please let them know that these are all available. They're pretty short. This first one does not have any words to it, so you're going to have to do some reading. But pay close attention to the teens, and I just love how they put it together, a short film about mental health. Here we go. Thanks. Would anybody be willing just to talk out and share a reaction to the video? Anybody want to just, from the gut, what you took away from that? It's okay if you don't want to. I just, there were so many things, and when I'm in a smaller group and we're closer and we're talking, and I get it. I know we're streaming. You're not on camera, but there's a bunch of things you could take away from there. Okay, and one of the things I really like about this video is the fact that, we know sometimes it's hard to talk about this and sometimes we feel uncomfortable, but we have to keep trying and we have to encourage people to open up, and that it's okay to have a whole variety of emotions, because that's what human beings are capable of. And so we're not expecting anybody to be perfect or do this alone. We're just trying to open up some conversations. And just because a person's feeling a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that they have a mental health condition. Okay, that's one thing that I really like to reinforce with students. But I really like how the young people are making these videos and trying to expand just beyond depression. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide. And here's the statistics. So, we took our statistics from the National Institute of Mental Health, and so early on, we talk about 1 in 5 U.S. adults live with a mental illness, and then we talk about youth data, and the youth, it's the same in the United States. They're experiencing or will experience a mental health condition at some point in their life. But it's very interesting what happened with the pandemic that we've all lived through, and we know that those numbers have increased. And so I put the Kaiser Family Foundation there because now the data we use talking with youth, they're talking about 2 in 5 youth are experiencing or will experience a mental health challenge at some point in their life. This is pretty significant because if somebody doesn't know somebody dealing with a mental health condition, chances are down the road they will know someone. And it might not be this year, it might not be next year, senior year, it might be when they go into college, because oftentimes mental health conditions, if they haven't had an early onset, usually in the early 20s is another big spike time for people feeling mental health struggles. Okay, so again, I'm trying to make parents aware of that because, right, we can get them through high school, and I always used to say this to my students, I'm trying to get you through, and if you're going on to college or if you're going right away into the workforce, I'm trying to get you through. But again, we're not done with these topics. It's a work in progress. We got to remember some of this. Here's what I find really troubling, that next statistic up there. It's estimated that only 50% of people with mental health conditions receive treatment. Would anybody help me out? What's the biggest reason why? Thanks. Shout it out. Ashamed. Awesome. Sorry. I'm trying to work with this. Stigma, right? That wall that's put up, they're ashamed to go get help. And that's what we mean by stigma. That preconceived idea, that maybe negative labeling, stereotyping. Again, sometimes we have to group things in order to talk about information. And that's how we sometimes use the word stereotype, but we're not being negative in that sense. But in this sense, when people are negative about people having mental health struggles, that's where we're trying to break down that wall so that people know they can go get help. And they should be able to talk to somebody. Everybody should have someone to talk to. And I just gave 4 presentations today to teenagers. And it was really sad for me because when I'm in a smaller group and I'm walking around and talking and I'm encouraging students to talk, and I went up to one young student there, and I was with a sophomore age group, and I asked that student, do you have somebody that you could talk to? And that student looked me right in the eye, and they shook their head, and I said, not even a friend? And they said, no, I don't trust anybody. I don't want to talk about these kinds of things, and I don't want to burden my parents. And man, that makes my heart break, but again, I have to validate that student because that's how students sometimes feel. They feel that wall, they feel shame, they feel stigma, and so that's where we're here today. We're trying to break that down. And it's a tough wall to break down, but we're gonna stick with it. I've been sticking with it for a lot of years, okay? So you guys guessed it, it's stigma. So one of the things then that we're trying to do is early intervention. Now I know in that video they say sometimes you can't know whether or not a person's going through a mental health challenge, and that is true. But researchers have put together a list of very common behaviors. Okay, so we're going to go over some signs and symptoms, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit more specifically in just a moment on that. We want you to feel comfortable reaching out and responding. And again, I've had parents call me over the years when things were going on, and I always appreciated that, to give me a heads up so I could be more effective. Because when a teacher's working with, over 30 students sometimes in a class or more, or if a counselor has a caseload, X numbers, 150, 250, thank you, I'm looking over there at Stacy. Right, they have these massive numbers. It's hard to get to know students, and that's why it's really important. We want parents to feel comfortable contacting teachers or the support staff. And when I say support staff, I always talk about my team, okay? And these are teams of people that I work with, and they're awesome, and they have students' best interest at heart. And so that's where Tina is the master at sharing all the resources, because she lives this day in and day out working through NAMI and other types of support. We are here together to be a team. And just a little bit, I was a cheerleading coach, so I'm a rah-rah, and I love to do this. So if you get that, if you're feeling my vibes, I can't help it. That's just one of the other things. Also, I did pep assemblies at school. So, I'm one of these people that I gotta bring people together, because nobody's doing this alone, right? All right, so here we go. You don't have to memorize this list. And this list was put together by researchers that talked about how most mental health conditions may or may not have some of these, but these are the more common ones. And not every single one is a person going to experience. And just because a person experiences one of these doesn't mean that they're suffering from a mental health condition. But it's still a good list to recognize, because I always say, trust your gut. Like, your student. If your student has not been acting like their self and they talk about frequency and intensity. So like that first one, we know there's a bunch of reasons why people should feel sad. There's real life situations that make people sad. We were talking today about, some students have lost people in their life through a death. Of course they're going to be sad. Of course that's going to be taking a lot of time to adjust. But we also look at then how much does it interfere with how you can function on a day-to-day basis and some of your other feelings. So I always tell students, look for those risky behaviors, or those ones that are just uncharacteristic. I like to call them red flag behaviors. You may see them in your student, okay? And maybe it's something with their mood, but it's been going on, and now it's getting more intense. Maybe they're doing interesting things with food. Sometimes they eat too much too often, or sometimes they don't eat enough. Again, we're not saying that it's disordered eating, we're not diagnosing, but maybe we need to go to a health professional to rule out any physical health conditions. Okay, there's nothing wrong with needing to see a doctor. I know so many people are afraid to go see doctors, and I'll admit, I sometimes don't want to go see a doctor either, because it's like, I'm just going to wait it out and see if it gets better. And again, with mental health conditions, right, sometimes that happens, but we're trying to get people to go, because the sooner we can get a proper diagnosis, the better the person's going to feel, okay, regardless of what type of strategies are being used. Here's where I throw in my story of why I actually became a volunteer, because everybody thought, when you retire, you just go off into la-la land and you don't do anything. Well, I knew I wasn't done, and this program called Ending the Silence always came into my students starting in the year 2000. I think it was about 2000, 2001. I'm pretty sure that was the year when it came in. And we were really fortunate to have this program, and I thought, boy, I could do this. I need to do this. And so that was always in the back of my mind, and so when I retired, I decided I have to do it, and here's the reason why. So growing up, like I started out my presentation with you, is we didn't talk about mental health. Mental health existed, and there was help out there. But this is a story about my mom, and I remember my mom being a happy-go-lucky mom, And I had siblings, and I had a mom and dad in my family, and we did some fun things. We fought a little bit. My brothers were right by me in age, and you know, we were a little bit punching each other. And you know, again, if you're a family that doesn't punch, we always got yelled at. But you know, we did some of that. And my parents would, you know, reprimand us, and then, you know, but we had fun. Now I'm in middle school, and I remember my mom's still happy-go-lucky, but I remember that my mom was sad more often, and she was also angry sometimes, and I didn't know why. And it wasn't like my brothers and I or sisters, we were doing anything wrong to get our parents' disapproval, but I just noticed that. But here's what I really noticed. My mom was drinking alcohol, and she was getting drunk. Now that was uncharacteristic behavior for my mom, but I'm a middle school kid, so what do I know? I didn't say nothing to anybody. So now I'm in high school, I'm doing my fun things. I'm doing band, cheerleading, track. And the school that I went to, we had an activities bus. And so I would get home late at night, and when I say late, like 6:30, 7 o'clock, almost most nights, freshman year all the way to senior year. This progressively got worse for my mother. When I would walk in the door, my mom would be passed out drunk somewhere in the house. Well, as a family, like, we knew it wasn't right, but we weren't talking about it. I didn't say anything to my siblings. I didn't say anything to my dad. We would just kind of roll our eyes or act like, I don't even know what, we just were ignoring it. And now I'm in college studying to be a teacher, and I remember taking my first formal class where we're talking about mental health stuff. And we're talking about, I remember the professor talking about mental health conditions, but depression specifically. And he said, sometimes people with undiagnosed mental health conditions use drugs or alcohol to cover what they're feeling because they sometimes don't even know what to do. Parents, that's when I thought, could my mom have undiagnosed depression? Well, here's where the story gets sad. I didn't do anything. I didn't go talk to a friend. I didn't talk to my dad. I didn't tell my sisters. I just built up this wall of stigma. So I really understand what stigma is, and that's why I'm wearing this shirt. You know, we want to be stigma-free. I could have talked to somebody, but I didn't. The story gets even worse because my mom went on to develop a very serious liver condition known as cirrhosis of the liver, and my mom died when I was 19. Now, that doesn't make me a bad person, and that doesn't make my mom a bad person. But I always want to empower, especially young people, to not be afraid like I was afraid. I was, you know, I just didn't have the courage to stand up and ask somebody for help because I didn't want to be judged. And I know, and parents, here's where students tell me when they talk to me on the side, right? And it's like, well, what's going on? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Have you talked to your parents? No, I can't talk to my parents because I don't want to disappoint them, or I don't want them to be mad at me, or I don't want to burden them. And you know, we work through that, right? Because we have to work through that. And I need to validate their feelings because that's what they're feeling. And again, that doesn't make parents bad. Somehow there's a wall built up, however it got built, let's break it down, okay? And so, you know, that's what I tell students. Have the courage to step up and do what you know you can do, and that's talk to somebody. And so we go on to talk a little bit about who are those trusted adults. I'm going to get to that with you. I'm doing a few things differently. I'm going to come back to this last one, and I'm going to tell you how I talk with students, and I'm going to help you too, because it's a very tough topic to talk about, but we can do it, and we can get through it and get the help that's out there. So in this next slide, here's where I need to ask you, what are you seeing at home? What do you see in your students? And so when I'm giving presentations with teachers, we talk about what do we see in our students, right? And teachers are trying to manage so many things, and sometimes you don't get to talk about the really important stuff and maybe personal stuff, but you start to maybe see some other behaviors. Some of this is pretty typical. I consider myself a sophomore teacher, and you know what? The definition, sophomore, disorganized. So I get that. So to a point, some of this can be sophomore behavior or freshman behavior. Usually by junior, senior year, when I was teaching advanced health, they were more organized. I didn't, you know, go through a book bag and ripping through papers, but the deal is, what do you see? oftentimes teachers will start to notice, these are some of the early, like, right, we're talking about early things, missing class, missing work, they're disorganized, the quality of their work has slipped for some reason, and maybe they're very emotional, and especially emotional about their grades. And again, it doesn't, they may not show it in front of the teacher, or they may act out, but sometimes they get this emotion going. Sometimes their friends see the emotion, okay? So we ask parents, what are you seeing at home? Again, this is a very abbreviated list, right? And like, it's not a checklist, and it doesn't mean, oh, now my student they're struggling. These are just times where we encourage check in. Hey, what's going on? Is something going on? Because again, kids, I just shared with you, kids don't want to disappoint you. So sometimes they're trying to manage things that they really can't manage very well, and so they think they're doing okay, but again, they're not meeting it. And again, we know teens' clocks tend to be different than adults. Like, we're ready for bed. Like, I'm about ready in an hour. But teens get more active at night. So I'm not talking about that, but sometimes if you notice that they can't shut it down at night, and they're having a hard time getting sleep, even after they've played video games or been on their phone or their devices, they're just have a conversation, right? And how are they reacting? Are they flying off the handle? Right? I know we talk about hormones and health, right? But it's not always all hormones. It can be other things going on. So hey, let's have some conversations. And some warning signs are really important that we talk about right away, and we try not to, again, I know sometimes parents are trying to give their student that room, right? Because that's part of adolescence. They want some room, and they want to get out of the nest, and it's hard to know how much do we give room, and this, that, and the other. But if you would notice some warning signs, like you've seen maybe some behaviors, but even if you haven't seen behaviors, but now you notice that you're hearing some things, or you're seeing some isolation, or you're seeing some reckless behaviors, and you know that the student has a plan, this is where we need to reach out immediately. And how we do that. Research shows the more direct you are talking about this topic, the better off it is. And when I say direct, and we have this conversation with our students, and we do this program in middle school too. And I say to 7th and 8th graders, we talk about, hey, if you're noticing this, we want you to have the courage. If you really feel like you can't talk to a friend like this, get your trusted adult. Okay, and by the way, I kind of skipped over talking to friends, because we validate, it's great to talk to friends. That's a good place to start, but we don't end there, because, right, we want to go to somebody that has more life experience, we hope, and that they're able to help. And so that's why we always encourage teens to be talking to their parents. And if they don't feel like they can go to their parent, and again, we're not dissing parents, because some kids have told me, the reason why I can't go to my parent is because my parent is part of the problem. And I always tell them, I get you. Because if I had an important situation, I would not have been going to my mom to talk, because you know my backstory now. Unfortunately, my mom couldn't have raised her head up to have a sober conversation. So if it's something that important, find another adult. And that's why we encourage our counselors, and we encourage the social workers. Those are people on your team. Those are there are teachers. It doesn't even have to be a health teacher. It could be any teacher you connect with. Who's that person? Is it a pastor? Is it somebody that's in your coach, right? And I think back, I had an aunt, and I had a band director that I could have talked to. And so anyhow, back to this, we want you to be very direct. And I always talk about I messages and I statements, because this is a really tough conversation to have. But if you could say, I need to talk to you about something really important, and I'm really nervous, but I care about you so much. I have to know you haven't been acting yourself, and I just have this gut feeling that something's not right, and I have to know, are you going to kill yourself? Are you thinking about suicide? So like, right when I say that in front of my students, like some of them are like, there's no way I'm going to say that, because that's going to put an idea in a person's mind. Research shows talking about suicide does not put ideas in a person's mind. As a matter of fact, it opens the door. to start a healthy conversation. Now, of course, people might react, but I always tell my students, don't be upset if your friend gets mad. Just listen. Let them springboard. Let them get off what's on their chest, because now, maybe that's the start. But you're going to listen. And if you're thinking this is a crisis situation, right, don't leave them alone. Call 911, and when we give this program to students, we have little cards that we hand out that has the 988 and other resources on it. We're going to share that with you later a little bit more with some resources. Obviously, we know that there's an emergency room or 911, and we want to be able to, and again, now I'm switching this up, so like as a parent, if this is happening in your home, and there's a situation where your student, maybe they've had an attempt or maybe they haven't, but you know what? Letting your school support team know is very critical. Of course, we're going to be very delicate with it. You know, I've had parent phone calls where I've had parents call me and they say, Millie, I just want to share this with you, and I don't want my son or daughter to know about this. Can we just keep this between us? I'm like, absolutely. Well, here's what's going down in our family. And again, the parents feeling that, but they're trusting me. But they wanted me to know so that when I'm trying to deal with that student in class, I might be aware of some behaviors. And then we make a plan. Me and the parent have made a plan. Hey, can I give you a call at the end of the week? And if I see something sooner than that, I'll give you an update on what I'm seeing in my classroom, or an email, like, right? I'm a phone call person, because, right, the intention in your voice, that's just me. But again, I get it, we're all busy, an email. But if I see something sooner, and if you get a phone call from the teacher, right, or that, support staff, this is some important stuff. So we're all on the same team. Show of hands out there. Is everybody aware now of the 988 number? Okay, awesome. And if you're not, that's why you're here today. So in our state, this is in Illinois, we have tried to streamline this National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, so you don't have to remember 1-800-273-TALK. So you can dial 988, and 988 is going to be a useful resource, not only for crisis situations like mental health crises, it's also for substance use situations, it's also for information. You can call for yourself, or you can call if you are concerned about someone else. So again, just be very clear of what kind of help you need, because there's trained professionals and they have multiple resources and they can hook you in with somebody else, right? So if it's something with substance abuse, we're having students go there. I'm going to share with you, parents, just this summer, my neighbor was going through a crisis and came to my house and knocked on my front door. And I'm like, I grabbed them, I'm like, we need to sit down, what's going on? And this person was, I knew a little bit of the story, and I'm going to make this very brief. I'm not a diagnosing professional. I'm not a counselor. I'm like, what's going on here? I'm like, you need to get some help. And I'm going to stick here with you, and we're going to do this together, and we're going to call 988, because, like, I needed help. Okay? So again, like, if you're sitting out there feeling stressed out, don't feel stressed out, because we have people out there that can help. And just trying to reassure is so important, okay? And reaching out, I've already kind of talked about this, and I have another question for you, okay? Could you give me a thumbs up? I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot, but do you know who give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and this isn't a shameful thing. I just need to know, do you know your students' mental health contacts, meaning maybe your counselor or your social worker? Can I get that validated? Okay, or not, and it's okay if you don't. So if you don't, and I'm seeing a few maybe not so sure, and again, there's a lot of reasons why you're not sure, right? You're trying to let your young person be a young person, right? But get to know who that person is. Stacy, can you help me real quick? Can you tell me how parents can find that information if they want to know who their student's mental health contact is? Can we just do this real quick? Can you just talk in this microphone since we're streaming? Even if you're not on camera. Okay, folks at home.
So either through the website, you can always find that information, but honestly, I just tell parents, like, you don't have to remember my name. That lady that I spoke to, for freshmen, if you call the Freshman Center and talk to the administrative assistants there, or if you call and ask for SS 10 through 12, if you have an older student, then you just say, hey, this is the name of my student, and I'm looking to speak to their counselor, and they'll make sure that you find the right person.
Thanks, I put her on the spot, but we know it's all for a good cause. And I just wanted to share with you a really quick story, and how we doing on time, because I'm getting ready to get Tina right up here. Very quick story. You know, although I don't work in the school, but I'm pretty confident because I've worked with a lot of mental health teams. You know, and teachers just, you know, we get to that person that we know, and then they take care of it from there, right? Because we are a team together. Right? So that's just a real quick story. We got one more thing. I've already covered all of this, right? Okay, but I have one quick video. Brene Brown has an awesome video. This is like 2 minutes on how do you make that connection? And again, feeling comfortable. So she's an American professor. She's done a lot of research on empathy and vulnerability. So let's just take a look at this.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
And so I just go to the next. There we go. All right. And so Tina, this is going to be your cue to come up, but while Tina's coming up to talk about resources, I know that's tough for parents because, right, you're in a situation where parenting, you want to do it from down there? Okay, awesome. It's a situation where, you know, like, I'm supposed to be the disciplinarian. I'm supposed to be, the person that get my kid to toe the line and right, and some of your family rules and such like that. But again, it's just one of those things that it's taking that pause, that moment to just maybe hear out what the student's going through and give them a chance to try to verbalize, because again, sometimes students don't know what they're going through. Okay, so Tina, here's some resources.
Okay, thank you. So lots of information in the presentation, and so we are NAMI Will Grundy. We are an organization who provides support services for individuals diagnosed with a mental illness and their families. If you are a caretaker or you provide supports or you have somebody living in your family who has a diagnosis of mental illness, you know that it can be a very difficult situation. Sometimes people who are struggling can truly create havoc in a family. And if you don't know what you don't know, right? When there's a good example, if you break your arm, you go to a professional and you get some advice. If you have high blood pressure, you go to the doctor and you get some advice, you get professional advice. If you are all of a sudden struggling with the diagnosis of mental illness, or like Millie mentioned, sometimes it's just emerging signs and symptoms of mental illness, and you're not quite sure, but you sort of in your gut know something here's not quite right. So we're not professionals, we're not therapists, we don't diagnose, but we are families who have similar challenges with young people that live in our home, or that we're caretakers for, or that we're people that we love who are struggling. And so peer support can be a very compelling avenue for support, especially again when you're sort of first getting started and wandering in the dark a little bit. What makes NAMI unique, NAMI, Will Grundy and other affiliates, what makes NAMI unique and what I appreciate most is that our support programs are facilitated by people with that expression lived experience. So if it's a support group for a person diagnosed with a mental illness, there is a person with a diagnosis facilitating the group. It's a person who's stable and living in recovery and gets some training and then comes back to help others. Similarly, a family support group is a family member who is a caretaker or is supporting or assisting, giving support to a person that's a family member or a loved one who has a diagnosis of mental illness. So, you know, that concept of walk in my shoes can be a very compelling level of support for an individual. It's important that you have that professional input too, psychiatrists, therapists, counselors, but peer support can also be a very compelling program of support to folks. So I think our brochure out front and our website, the website information is in here. We have a pretty good selection of support groups. What we do is we schedule family support and connection support, connection being the support group for an individual diagnosed with mental illness. We schedule them at the same time, and so sometimes if you have a diagnosis of mental illness and you're even thinking about going to a support group, it can be very helpful if you have a loved one or a family member who will provide transportation and kind of moral support, and so we often see that that's helpful. But then they're in two separate rooms. The family support's in one room and connection in the other. So at the core of our services, I think that concept of peer support is really important. And again, it's important that we get educated, very important that we seek professional help when needed. But the idea of peer support is so helpful because you've got folks around you that have a little bit of an idea of what you're going through. So family support is really helpful. Families who want to learn more about mental health, we have a program called Family to Family, and it's an 8-week education program. All of our services are at no charge. The 8-week Family to Family program has a lot of information, a lot of education about mental illness as a brain disease. You know, it's brain chemistry. It's nobody's fault. It's nothing anybody did. It's not unlike high blood pressure or diabetes. It's a medical condition that occurs and challenges a person. And so, again, this family-to-family program, lots of education, but then lots of information about setting boundaries and problem solving and communication, because again, it can mental illness can wreak havoc in your household, and sometimes it's hard for you as a parent, it's hard for other siblings to understand, why does he get to do whatever he wants? You're just spoiling him, or, all of those kinds of feelings. Lots of conversation and education about that in family to family. So again, we have the brochure, we have the website in here. The website has lots and lots of information about professional services, about Social Security, who to talk to, about getting Social Security. Again, a lot of those housekeeping kinds of issues that are helpful are included in the Family to Family program. We, of course, have a bias towards Will and Grundy counties because that's what we serve. But we do have online support for both connection and family supports. In fact, on Sundays, we do the third Sunday, for example, yesterday I did family support online, had a really good turnout. So we do have some online things, the family to family support. We do have folks from Kankakee that come to the family to family class. But then NAMI Illinois also has a very wide schedule of online support programs and classes. Family support is on the second and fourth Wednesday. And then just an aside, there is a group of folks, there's an organization in Kankakee called Project Sun, and some of those representatives, along with some folks from Riverside Hospital, are working very hard to create a NAMI Kankakee. I don't think it'll be too much longer before they'll be promoting some classes. They've had some folks training, and they're going to start with a connection and a family support. So I don't think it'll be too much longer. I hope by fall there'll be a NAMI Kankakee, so you'll have a little bit better access, right in your own backyard. Any questions about any of that? Okay.
Awesome. And then, finish this up?
Yeah.
Almost done?
Okay.
We're not quite done, but I know it takes a minute. We've just given you so much information. And Tina, I'm so glad you talked about that online, because one of the things, Tina and I have been trying to get some programs into the schools up in Will County, and it has been a long process. 2 years and we still don't have, right, Tim? We're getting close.
We're going to talk about that after that.
So, and that's why when I was asked to come down here, and I'm so glad these teachers, we're really kindred spirits, and they're like, really, you'll drive all the way down here? I'm like, you betcha, babe, I'm coming down here, because we got kids, we got to talk. So, I'm just big on just general coping strategies, and I always want to, parents, reinforce with your students that there's supports out there. There's the text line, kids love the text. Here's all of our stuff. Again, even adults need multiple sources to talk to, okay? And yeah, thank you for taking your phone out and shooting a picture of that. That's awesome. So if you wanted to do that real quick before I, and again, I know I work with a lot of students where their family, they speak Spanish, that's it. So that's another thing that's really awesome about Will Grundy is we have this resource. We know that recovery is possible, and I love this picture because it's a winding road. It's not going to be a smooth sailing. And so taking care of your student and yourself, that's so important. One of the things that I usually do with students, and because of the time, I'm not going to do this with you, but I would love to teach you this breathing technique. I talk about the power of the breath, the calming breath. And I have students stand up and they breathe in through their nose and out through their nose. It's not mouth breathing. You do that at least 3 times, it changes. There's data to show how it changes your brain. Not that you're going to have a great day, but it calms you. And students, they can't even believe it, like, whoa, I feel so better. Because, right, we're hunched over, we're mad, we're holding our body in different postures, and now we're just cooling it down, right? Trying to change our focus. that can be something that everybody uses. And think about how you're fueling yourself, how you're eating, how you're sleeping, or how you're not getting enough of that, and how you're not moving. Just get out and move, right? Do whatever your favorite things are. So those are some of the go-to strategies that we talk about. And again, here's for more information. And if you wanted to take a picture of that, I don't know if it was on the other slide before, but thank you for your participation. If you wouldn't mind just filling out, it's just 7 little check marks, and if you have a comment for us, or if you want more information, Tina, I'm going to give these to Tina, and then we have Cheryl as our secretary that she can forward you information, so we will do that. And you know that your mental health person, your team member here is Stacy Stover, is that how you say it? You don't have to remember her name, but you just call for your students' alpha list, and we can get you some help. All right? Great. Anything, Stacy?
No, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, parents, for coming out tonight and being here and supporting this Parent University. It's a great thing. And we'll see you next time.